Hey, today on Animal Quests, 6 parents on family trips each made one small mistake around a wild animal while their children watched. From a father in Botswana who stepped out of the car for a photo beside a bull elephant, to a mother in Namibia who walked off a rhino trail for a better angle at the worst possible moment. But first, the Serengeti, and a father who got out to grab one thing off the track with a lion pride resting a stone's throw away. The morning of July 18th, 2015 was bright and dry over the Serengeti in northern Tanzania. The Marshall family was 3 days into a self-drive trip, the kind where you take a rented vehicle out onto the tracks on your own, with a map and a list of rules. They had stopped at the edge of an open plain where a pride lay resting in the short grass, several lionesses and a scatter of cubs lying just off the edge of the track. Theo Marshall sat at the wheel with his window down. Theo was 41, a British father of 2 and the planner of the trip. He had read the briefing twice and followed its first rule for 3 days, that you stay inside the vehicle because the lions treat the car as one large, harmless shape and never count the people inside it. Self-drive is the cheaper, freer way to see a place like the Serengeti. There is no guide in the seat beside you, no one whose job it is to stop you doing something foolish. Just a rented vehicle, a fuel can, a radio, and whatever judgment you brought with you. For 3 days, that freedom had given the Marshalls the trip of their lives. Lions at dawn, a cheetah out on a termite mound, the great herds moving across the plain. It had also, quietly, taught them that the animals out here were something to be watched rather than feared. The pride was not hunting. It was the middle of the morning, the lions full and flat on their sides after a night of feeding. A few cubs play wrestling in the grass. 3 days of sightings exactly like this one had taught the family that the lions simply did not care about the car. Then a child's sun hat caught the breeze through the open window and tumbled out onto the track, just in front of the vehicle. It was a cheap thing, the kind you buy in an airport, and Theo looked at it, looked at the resting pride, and decided he had time. It would take 5 seconds. The pride had not so much as lifted a head at the engine, the doors, or the cameras in the 20 minutes the family had sat there watching. And that is what gets me. 3 days of those lions ignoring the car taught him the wrong lesson. That calm means safe. A lion can cover the ground between resting and killing faster than a person can stand up and turn around. Over a short distance it closes in about a second, low and silent, with no run-up and no warning sound. By the time you understand it is moving, it has already arrived. Theo opened the door, stepped down onto the track, and crouched for the hat. One of the lionesses lifted her head and fixed on him, and then she was moving. He had time to straighten and half turn back toward the door, and no time at all for anything after that. His wife and children were a few feet away behind glass and metal, and there was nothing any of them could do but stay where they were. A lion does not need to carry a kill far when there is nothing around to take it from. The pride simply settled where they were, a short way off the track, and the morning went very quiet. The family kept the doors shut and the windows up, which is what kept them alive, and the wife got on the radio and called it in. The plane was a long way out on rough track, and by the time a response vehicle reached them, there was nothing to be done for Theo. The pride had pulled back only a short way and had to be held off while the team worked. It took the better part of an hour for that first vehicle to reach them across the open country. An hour the wife spent keeping 2 frightened children turned away from the window. A phone propped on the dashboard had been filming the resting pride and caught all of it, and it was handed to the local wildlife authorities and never released. The 2 children were not physically hurt, and the family was flown home through their embassy. The rental company rewrote its rules that season to spell the thing out in plain language, that the most dangerous moment of any self-drive is the one where someone decides the animals look calm enough to step out. It is the most repeated warning in self-drive safari and the most ignored, because for days at a time the animals make it look like nonsense. He did everything right for 3 days and got one thing wrong for 10 seconds. With lions, that is all it takes. The next one also broke a rule she had kept all week, and she broke it for the gentlest reason there is, to give her children one last look at the river before they went home. The morning of September 5th, 2018 came up cool and gray over the lower Zambezi in Zambia. A tented camp sat a little way back from the river, close enough to hear the water and the hippos through the night. The Dunmore family was on the last day of a week there, and Carrie Dunmore was awake before her husband, out among the tents in the first gray light with her 2 children. The camp was still mostly asleep, just the sound of the river and a kettle going somewhere behind the kitchen tent. Carrie was 36, an Australian mother of 2, and the one who read every rule sheet and followed it. The first rule was no walking toward the river alone at dawn or dusk, because that is when the hippos move between the grass they graze at night and the water they hold by day. It had been a wonderful week, the kind a family saves for years to take. They had watched elephants come down to drink at dusk and lain awake to the sound of hippos grunting in the dark a stone's throw from their beds. That sound, huge and comic and constant through the night, was half of why the children loved the place. It was also the reason the rule about the river existed, though a noise that friendly makes a poor warning. She had kept that rule all week. On this last morning, with no escort awake yet, and 2 children who wanted to see the river one more time, she decided a short walk to the bank could not hurt. At dawn, the hippos are coming back. They spend the night out grazing well away from the water, and as the light comes, they walk down to the river along the same trails they always use. Carrie took the children down a short path toward the water, the 2 of them a little way behind her as she went ahead to find a clear spot at the edge. What none of them could see in the half-light was a hippo off to the side and above them on the slope, finishing its night on land, with a trail back to the river that ran down past Carrie to the water. She had walked to the edge and put herself between the animal and the only place it was going. She was maybe 15 feet from the water when she stopped to wave the children toward a flat spot to stand. Above and behind her, screened by a thorn bush, the hippo had already turned for the river. Get between a hippo and the water at once, and it does not stop. It goes straight through whatever is in the way. A hippo on land can run faster than a person over a short distance, far faster than its shape suggests. Heading for water, it commits to a straight line and holds it, and its weight and its jaws end things in a single pass. At dawn, with the trails in use, that line can be anywhere along the bank. The hippo came down its trail at a heavy run, and Carrie was on that trail at the water's edge. There was no time and nowhere to go. The children were a little way back up the slope, off the line the animal was taking, close enough to see it and far enough to be missed. It went past them, through their mother, and into the river, and it did not look back. By the time the water had settled, the children were already running for the tents. The whole thing, from the first heavy crash in the brush to the splash of the animal going into the river, had taken only a few seconds. She was the careful one all week, and a careful week meant nothing against 30 seconds in the wrong place at first light. The children reached the camp screaming, and staff were on the bank within a couple of minutes. But a hippo leaves very little anyone can do. Carrie did not survive. There was no camera and no footage, only the children's account, and the trail, and the marks at the edge. Her husband, still asleep in the tent when it happened, had to be woken to the worst news a person can be woken to. He had heard nothing over the river and the ordinary sounds of the camp coming awake, and the family was notified onward through diplomatic channels. The camp changed its rule that same week. No guest near the water at dawn or dusk for any reason without an armed escort, and the early gathering point was moved well back from the bank. It is the most common way people are killed by hippos, and it almost never looks dramatic beforehand. A person on a path at the wrong hour, an animal that wants the water, and a few feet of ground that belong to the animal and not to anyone else. Carrie had read that warning on the laminated card in the tent and nodded at it, the way everyone does, without ever quite believing it applied to a short walk at dawn. Her 2 children saw all of it. They wanted one last look at the river, and they will always wish they had stayed in the tent. The next father took his children right down to the water too, in the heat of a long afternoon, to a lake where the thing waiting in the shallows had been there the whole time. The afternoon of March 22, 2013 was hot and still on the shore of Lake Baringo, in the Rift Valley of Kenya. The lake is freshwater, ringed with reeds, and home to a large population of big crocodiles. A lakeside lodge kept its guests back from the open water behind a low-marked line and a simple warning that the shallows near the reeds were where the crocodiles lay and waited. The Keever family came down toward the shore in the heavy heat of the afternoon. Vaughn was 45, an American father of 2, on a trip he had promised the family for years. He had heard the lodge's warning and had no intention of swimming or wading, only the common belief that a warning like that is meant for careless people and not for him. Lake Baringo is a strange and beautiful place, a wide soda-blue lake in the floor of the Rift Valley, ringed with reed beds and fish eagles and low green islands. It looks like the gentlest water in Africa. It also holds a dense population of large crocodiles that have lived alongside the lakeside villages and lodges for generations, and every one of those communities can tell you about someone taken at the edge. The children, 10 and 13, wanted to see the water and the birds working the reeds, so Vaughn walked them down the slope toward the shore. The afternoon was brutally hot. At the bottom, he told the children to wade a few feet up the bank, stepped over the marked line, and crouched right at the edge to splash some water on his face and his neck. The water was cool against the heat, and for a second or two it was the best he had felt all afternoon. The lake in front of him looked flat and empty. Nothing about the surface gave anything away. Just bright water and a few birds in the reeds. The kind of view that makes a place feel gentle and safe when it is neither. A crocodile had been holding in those reeds a short way to his left the entire time he came down the slope. It would have been lying motionless in a foot of water among the stems, its eyes and the ridge of its back the only parts breaking the surface, no different to the eye than a half-sunk log. He did not swim or wade. He crouched at the edge for 10 seconds, and the edge is already inside a crocodile's reach. A big crocodile holds dead still in the shallows where the water meets the bank, because that is exactly where prey comes down to drink. It does not stalk, and it does not chase. The strike and the roll into deep water are one motion, and from a crouch at the edge there is no distance left to use. A crocodile survives by letting everything else make the final mistake for it. It can sit in the same patch of water for hours without moving more than its eyes, waiting for something to step close enough that the gap no longer matters. Vaughn cupped the water in his hands. The crocodile came out of the reeds to his left, took him, and rolled back toward the deep in a single movement. The children, a few feet above him on the bank, were not in the water and were not touched. They saw the water erupt, and their father gone, and they turned and ran up the slope to the lodge. One of them was still holding the little camera they had carried down to photograph the eagles. The lake went flat again behind them, as if nothing had happened at all. Staff and the local authorities searched the shoreline through the evening and recovered Vaughn's body the following day, some distance along the bank. A crocodile takes what it catches to a spot it knows and waits there, so the search had to work the shore on the animal's terms. The lodge closed the waterfront to guests while it went on, and the other. Families were moved to rooms away from the lake. There was no footage of any of it. His family was reached through their embassy, and the 2 children were cared for at the lodge until relatives could come. The lodge did not change its rule, because the line and the warning had been there all along. What changed was how the staff give that warning now, less as a polite notice and more as the plain fact that the edge of the water is the most dangerous step a guest can take. Every staff member at that lodge has watched a visitor drift toward the water for a better photograph, and every one of them has learned to call out long before the visitor reaches the line, because at the line, it can already be too late. Vaughn never heard a call, because there was no guide with the family that afternoon, only a father who had decided the warning was meant for other people. He knew the warning was there. He just did not think the last few feet counted, and at Baringo, that is the whole game. The next father was not standing at the edge of anything. He was standing in the open, a few feet from his own car, doing the one thing every visitor is told never to do, for a photo he thought would take a moment. The afternoon of June 30th, 2021 was clear and mild along the Chobe riverfront in northern Botswana. It is one of the best places in Africa to see elephants, which cross the road between the bush and the water all through the day, often passing close to the vehicles. The Van family was out on a self-drive and came on a large bull feeding on his own just off the track. Peter Van slowed the car and stopped a short way off, hoping for exactly this, a big lone bull in the open with nothing in the way of the shot. Peter was 43, a Dutch father of 2 and a careful driver who had kept his distance all trip. He knew the rules: keep the engine running, keep back, never get out, and never get between an elephant and the water. The bull looked calm and busy with its feeding. The Chobe riverfront in the dry season is one of the great wildlife spectacles on Earth. Thousands of elephants come down to the water through the afternoon, crossing the road in long gray lines, close enough to the vehicles that you can hear them breathing and tearing at the grass. Visitors see so many, so close, behaving so peacefully, that the danger quietly drains out of the whole thing. By the 3rd or 4th crossing, it stops feeling like a wild animal and starts feeling like scenery. He wanted one photo of himself beside the car with the animal behind him for scale, the kind that shows people at home how big these things really are. So he left the engine running, told his wife and the 2 children to stay put, and stepped out on the far side of the car from the bull. For a moment, it was fine. The bull kept feeding while Peter framed his shot, edging a little way out from the vehicle so that both he and the elephant would fit. That movement, a person stepping clear of the car and out into the open, is exactly the thing a bull reads as something to be dealt with. The elephant stopped feeding, turned, and put its full attention on the small, upright shape that had separated itself from the big, harmless one. For a second or two, it just stared, ears spread wide, weighing it. Peter, looking through his phone screen, did not read the ears or the stillness for what they were. He took a half step further out to widen the frame. A feeding bull looks like the calmest thing alive, and people read it wrong. That is not friendliness, just tolerance for a car it is ignoring. A spread of the ears and a lift of the head is the last warning an elephant gives, and most people cannot read it until it is far too late. A bull can go from standing to a full charge in a couple of strides, and over open ground it is far faster than a person. At close range, there is no outrunning it and nowhere to hide. The bull came at him without a long wind-up, head up, ears out, fast. Peter turned for the car door, but he had stepped too far out to make it back in time. It reached him in the open beside the vehicle, in full view of his wife and children behind the glass. They stayed inside, the one thing Peter had told them to do, and it is the only reason the rest of the family came home. When it was over, the bull moved off toward the river. The whole thing, from the bull turning to the bull walking away, had taken only a handful of seconds, far less time than Peter had spent lining up the photo. It is never the long charge that kills people in these encounters. It is the short one, from close range, with the car door just a stride too far away. He never even took the picture. The size he wanted to capture is what gave him no chance once it turned. The wife climbed across into the driver's seat and got the family away, then flagged the next vehicle along the track, which radioed for help. There was nothing to be done for Peter by then. A phone wedged on the dashboard had been filming out the windscreen and recorded all of it, and it was handed to the local wildlife authorities and never released. The 2 children were unhurt, and the family was taken home through their embassy. The guides along that stretch use his case in their briefings now, because it is the cleanest example there is. A careful man, a calm elephant, and a single step too far. They tell it plainly that the bull did nothing unusual and nothing cruel, and that everything which went wrong was decided the moment a door opened. Other vehicles had stopped along that stretch by then, and more than one of them had stepped out for a photo of the very same bull only minutes before. Every one of those people had walked away with a picture and a story, which is exactly what makes the rule so easy to break. People step out for that shot all the time and walk away fine. Every time, the rule looks more like it is for someone else. The next one happened on foot, on a guided walk where everyone was doing more or less the right thing, until one of them decided she wanted a better angle. The morning of November 11th, 2022 was hot and bright in Damaraland, in the northwest of Namibia. It is open, broken country of rock and low scrub, one of the few places left where you can track black rhino on foot. A small group set out behind an armed guide to find one, walking in single file the way they had been told. Among them was Renata Salas, with her 2 teenage children just behind her. Renata was 40, a Spanish mother of 2, on the trip of a lifetime with her teenagers. She had listened to the guide's briefing: stay together, stay quiet, stay behind him, and watch for noise and scent, because a black rhino barely sees and reacts to sound and smell before anything else. Tracking black rhino on foot is one of the rarest and most carefully managed experiences in African tourism. The desert-adapted rhino of Damaraland are followed by trackers who know each animal by sight, and the rules exist because out here there is no vehicle to dive into and nothing to climb. With an animal that can cross the open ground faster than a person can turn and run, the only thing keeping a group safe is staying together, staying quiet, and keeping the wind in their faces. The guide found the rhino dozing in the scrub and brought the group in slowly from downwind, where the air carried their scent away from it. He stopped them in a loose line behind a screen of low bushes and motioned for stillness. From there, the rhino was half hidden, gray on gray in the brush, and Renata could not get a clean photograph of it past the people and the cover in front of her. So she left the line. She moved off to the right on her own, picking her way across the open ground toward a gap in the bushes where she would have the animal clear, getting further from the group with every step. The guide saw her go and hissed at her to come back, but a quiet voice does not carry to someone 40 feet away and lost in a screen, and he could not raise his own without doing the very thing he was trying to avoid. The single file is not about manners. Step out of it alone and you stop being a shape the guide can keep safe. She reached the gap and raised her phone to get the angle she had to shift her feet on the broken ground, and a flat chip of rock turned under her boot and cracked hard against another, a small, sharp sound that carried in the still morning. She was a good way out from the group now, alone in the open, and she had just made the one thing a rhino cannot ignore. A black rhino builds its sense of the world from sound and smell, not sight. A sharp noise from open ground close by does not make it pause and study the scene. It turns and drives at the sound to meet whatever made it. She walked 20 feet out for a photo and put a boot wrong on a rock. That was the whole mistake. The rhino came up out of the scrub and went for the sound, straight at the lone figure out in the open. It happened in a blink. The guide was already shouting and shoving the nearest people down into the cover of the bushes and rock, Renata's 2 children among them. All of it in the same few chaotic seconds. Renata was too far out on her own, with nothing close enough to reach. The open ground she had crossed to find her angle was the same open ground that left her nowhere to go. There had been perhaps 3 seconds between the crack of the rock and the rhino reaching her, and all 3 were spent simply understanding what was happening. The charge was over almost before the group understood it had started. The guide kept the rest of them down and together until the rhino moved off, then got them back and called for help. But Damaraland is remote and hard on a vehicle, and it was a long time before anyone reached them. Renata did not survive. There was no camera running on any of it. The local authorities recorded a death on a guided walk, and the family was notified through diplomatic channels. The operator changed its rules afterward, a hard limit on how close any group is taken on foot, and no one, for any reason, steps out of the line. The trackers who had followed that rhino for years said it had never shown a sign of aggression in its life. It had not gone looking for anyone. It had answered a sharp sound from close by the only way it knew. The animal was located and checked over in the days that followed and left exactly where it was, because it had done nothing but be a rhino. The single file looks like a fussy little rule, right up until you see what stepping out of it costs. The last one did not happen out in the wild at all. It happened inside a camp, in the dark, a few steps from the lit deck where a man's family was still sitting. The night of April 9th, 2019 was warm and dark at an unfenced lodge on a river channel in the Sabi area, on the western edge of the Greater Kruger in South Africa. Unfenced means what it sounds like. The animals move through the camp at night as they please, and guests are walked to and from their rooms after dark by staff with torches. The Aldous family had finished dinner and were together on the lit main deck. Grant Aldous got up to walk back to the room for something they had left behind. Grant was 38, a Canadian father of 2, easygoing, and a few days into a trip everyone was loving. He knew the rule, that you call an escort to walk you anywhere after dark, and he had used it all week. Late and tired, with the room only a short way off down a lit path, calling for someone felt like more fuss than it was worth. Unfenced camps are sold as the real thing, and they are. There is nothing between you and the bush but good sense and a handful of rules, and most of the time that is the whole magic of the place. The catch is that those rules are not decoration. They are the entire safety system, and they only work if every guest follows them every single time, including the last tired walk of the night, after a week in which nothing has gone wrong. What Grant did not think about, because most guests never do, was why the rule existed at all. The lodge sat right on a channel of the river, and at night, the hippos came up out of the water and into the camp to graze on the watered lawns between the buildings, sometimes within 60 feet of the deck where his family was sitting. A hippo out of the water at night is doing the most normal thing in its world, and it spends that time well away from the safety it trusts. The one rule it lives by is that nothing gets between it and the way back to the water. Guests almost never see any of this. The hippos come in once the lamps are low and the camp has gone quiet, and they are gone again before first light, leaving only cropped grass and heavy round tracks across the lawns to show they were ever there. People picture hippos in the water. At night, they are out on land in the dark, which is when they are most dangerous. Grant set off down the path on his own, his eyes on the lit patches and the dark between them. Out on the lawn to his left, unlit and silent, a hippo was grazing its way through the grass, and the path Grant was walking ran straight between the animal and the channel it had come from. He never saw it. He walked quietly into the one stretch of ground where a person must not be. There was a low moon, and the path lights threw small pools onto the sand with complete dark between them. A grazing hippo makes very little sound. Grant had no way of knowing he was sharing the lawn with well over 2 tons of animal until it moved. A hippo heading for water does not go around what is in front of it. On land, over a short run, it is faster than a person, and it holds a straight line to the water no matter what is in the way. Its weight and its jaws finish the rest in a single pass. What makes hippos so dangerous is that they do not behave like predators. They are not hunting, and they are not trying to chase something down. They are simply moving where they intend to go, and anything standing on that route becomes an obstacle. Something, a sound, or a movement, or just Grant's shape on the path, sent the hippo for the water. It came off the lawn at a heavy run, on the line it always took, and Grant was standing on that line in the dark. It hit him and went over him, and carried onto the channel without slowing. Up on the lit deck, the family heard it more than saw it, a crash of something huge moving through the dark where he had gone. He was not careless. He He just walked into the gap between a hippo and its water, the worst place to stand in Africa. Staff were down the path within a minute or two with torches, but a hippo that size leaves very little anyone can do. Grant did not survive. There was no camera, only the family on the deck and the staff who reached him. The local authorities and the lodge recorded the death, and the family was supported home through their embassy. The lodge tightened the one rule that would have prevented all of it, that no guest takes a single step on the paths after dark without an escort, however short the walk, because the camp at night belongs to the animals moving through it. Hippos kill more people in Africa than lions and rhino put together, and a great deal of it happens exactly like this, on land, after dark, when a person and an animal turn out to want the same patch of ground. Grant had walked that same path to dinner 3 hours earlier, in the light, with his children beside him, and thought nothing of it at all. The escort cannot fight a hippo off. It just keeps a guest and a hippo off the same dark path. He skipped it to save 2 minutes.